Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. How you guys doing? This is John Allen. I'm doing a live video and a secondary recording as well, and you may be able to see this video later on YouTube. But I thought I'd talk about a little bit about 700 Broadway. As you guys know, those of you who've read the newspaper article and familiar with the property, it's a new construction property that was paid for with tax dollars, and no one never moved in, and the building was not completed. There was a Channel 2 news story on it a couple of years ago in which I was involved in the story. And recently, or this past weekend, today is March 25th, 2024, but this past weekend, there was a newspaper article regarding the property. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. First, just let me start saying that this video is about a building at 700 Broadway, Gary, Indiana, that was torn down and demolished after $1.5 million plus and counting was sunk into the property of taxpayers' money. The loan was given to 747 Broadway Plaza, LLC, and John Coldia is the president of that company, or was the president of that company, is now since dissolved. The city, when this gentleman failed to fulfill his agreement and complete the building, they filed a complaint note and foreclosure. I have a copy here that I read. And what they did was they sued to get the building back. Anyway, during the course of the suit, they went into a settlement, and the terms of the settlement is not necessarily in the agreement that was filed with the court. It was just a boilerplate settlement agreement filed with the court in the Lake County Court, and the judge ultimately dismissed the suit due to a settlement between the parties. I don't know what that settlement was, but I went to the sales disclosure and discovered two important things. One, Mr. Caldea was given $150,000 in exchange for deeding the property to a third party that was not a part of the litigation, and that party is the Northwest Indiana Development Corporation. The Northwest Indiana Development Corporation, in the newspaper article, is said, or is couched in the article to suggest that it's a division of the Gary Housing Authority. The Gary Housing Authority is what's commonly called a PHA, a public housing authority. Most cities have them. And it's a separate municipal corporation within the city operating to help poor people with clean, fair, and safe housing. They may do that by issuing vouchers. They may do that by offering subsidized housing. So that's the gist of the ball of wax about the housing authority. However, I want to highlight some points here, right? And which I take issue, which was the purpose of this video. And we're going to try to raise some questions that we seek to be answered regarding this as taxpayers. Okay, first, do we think it was a good decision at all to take your main thoroughfare of commerce and set up public housing or subsidized housing? And I say no, because one, you don't tax that land, and that's the most taxable land in a city is your downtown. So that didn't make much sense at all to do that. I don't think that was a good business decision. The second thing is the GHA Housing Authority, right? They plan to build another subsidized housing property in the footprint of the one we just lost the $1.5 million and the $150,000 in. So I don't think this makes much sense at all, because the building in which their office is located is 1 block away. Their building in which the office is housed itself includes subsidized housing, and directly across the street, or diagonally across the street from 700 Broadway, the subject property, is a brand new subsidized housing building. So how much subsidized housing are we going to put in our downtown? Not because I'm against subsidized housing or senior housing, but because two reasons, which we can't just dance around. There is already existing subsidized housing. We miss the tax base, and we also miss the commercial opportunities for private investment, which create jobs and taxes. So I find that to be very problematic. The other issue that I find to be problematic is that we're throwing good money after bad. We already lost $1.5 million. In fact, the loan was amended 4 times. It was amended in 2013. The loan was created in 2011. It was amended in 2013 for another $70,000. Okay. And then, of course, the cost of the settlement, and then the cost of demolition, which I'm going to get to after this. So we're throwing good money out the bag. So why should the housing authority pay for the demolition of this building? Why not those responsible for the building of the building? Why not another source, even if we had to come up with a source to get rid of it? The money that we use to help our quote unquote most vulnerable, as they were called, being our seniors or our underhoused or underserved with housing, their money is being used to knock down a building after other parties that had nothing to do with them, or the GHA dropped the ball. So this is baffling to me. Again, I kind of echo what Mayor Milton said about the situation. I look forward to the housing authority working in conjunction with city departments too in the future. But this immediate action was a very, very bad idea. And I think someone is not necessarily being a good steward of our housing dollars. Okay. Another thing, this building was also taxed at $5,940 a year. It went delinquent all the way up to $24,913 according to county records. And I can attest to this delinquency because I caused the certificate to be purchased, which a third party came and redeemed the certificate, I guess, to save the building. And again, like I said, the loan was amended 4 times. So when we look into the idea that, according to the article, that Northwest Indiana Development Corporation is operating as a leg of the housing authority, I don't think that's appropriate either. And if you guys really understood it, you wouldn't think it was appropriate either, right? The Northwest Indiana Housing Authority CEO or president and his founder are both the former and the current executives of the Gary Housing Authority. So if I'm restricted as a housing authority, and I'm restricted maybe as a board, or I'm restricted as the executive from doing certain things the housing authority can do or operate in a certain way, right? I shouldn't just be able to create an offshoot through manufacturing a non-for-profit LLC, again, no taxes. And the purpose of this LLC is for public good, right? And I'm gonna read a quote from one of the purposes of the articles. I have a copy of the articles here. And it says, to promote economic and community vitality throughout the city of Gary, to foster and enhance economic development, talent attraction, development and retention, entrepreneurial growth in the city of Gary, Indiana, to relieve the burdens of federal, state, and local government by facilitating housing and other development projects throughout the city of Gary, to act as a catalyst in creating and sustaining a thriving community for residents, industry, and visitors, to combat community deterioration and racial discrimination by developing critical capital to underserved communities throughout Gary. It sounds very noble, and there's nothing wrong with any of these ideals, except that these ideals and goals is not the mission statement of the Gary Housing Authority. Therefore, this organization should not be ran as a proxy of the Gary Housing Authority. And an example of how this can really, really go astray. So let's say I'm the executive director of the Housing Authority. I get the board to pass a resolution to say that we don't want a building that we bought, and we bought it with Housing Authority money. Therefore, it becomes a public asset, okay? Because the Housing Authority money is public funds, okay? So we buy this public asset. I go back and change my mind about the utilization of this public asset. We're not going to use it for that anymore. So now let's say we got, for example, $300,000. I'm just throwing a number out there that we invested in this public asset. How do the people, the underserved, the most vulnerable, get their 300 grand back if I in turn have the authority to gift or sell it at a discount to the Northwest Indiana Development Corporation? I just deed it to them. It's no taxes on it. We can actually land bank it and just sit on it. And maybe some developer come. And what if the developer buy it from the Northwest Indiana Development Corporation for $500,000? One, when does the GHA, the public, get their $300,000 back? Number two, not only when does the GHA get their $300,000 back, who absorbs the $200,000 profit? The non-for-profit? So the question is, is the Northwest Indiana Development Corporation created as a land bank to land bank public property and avoid taxation to sell at a later date? Or is it created, or maybe even created for one purpose and utilized for another, to enrich the Northwest Indiana Development Corporation? After all, if you have a non-for-profit, you have to pay vendors, you can pay staff, and who would be those vendors? And what is the salary of the staff? So I think it's a little conflictual for those decisions to be made in-house. But anyway, I like to come forward with my documents when I say something, because a lot of times I'm accused of making allegations. But here I have the sales disclosure from the transaction for 700 Broadway. And the preparer of the sales disclosure is the GHA attorney. And I notice here for the signatures, you have to have the buyer's and the seller's signatures on these documents. And you actually attest under the penalties of perjury, I hereby certify the sales disclosure to the best of my knowledge and belief is true, correct, and complete as required by law and as prepared in ordinance with 6-1.1-5.5. A person who knowingly and intentionally falsifies the value of transferred real property or omits falsify any information required to provide it commits a level 5 felony. I noticed something in common with this sales disclosure and a couple of others, right, involving the same non-for-profit. The names are always typed in, but they never sign. They never sign the sales disclosure.
So, wait a minute. So, a non-sales disclosure.
We have a question.
A non-signed sales disclosure, is that legal?
I don't know if it's valid. Let's not even use the word legality, but I question, is the sales disclosure valid? Because I transfer properties all the time. They make sure I sign. So the seller, John Coldia, did not sign. The receiver, Northwest Indiana Development Corporation, Tyrell Bonds, the CEO, did not sign the sales disclosure. Maybe they're exempt from signing sales disclosures like everybody else. I don't know. I think it'd have been appropriate for them to sign the sales disclosure attesting to the correctness of the information. And the articles of incorporation, or the articles of incorporation, was also put together by attorney from Ice Miller Law Firm, LLP, down in Indianapolis. This is the same law firm that appeared at my Supreme Court hearing. And I'm going to play that. I'm going to clip the audio and play it in another video for you guys, where she stated, we really, really, really need this block demolished because it's for the citizens of Gary. That was 4 years ago, and you guys still don't have a building. So I doubt the real reason to take up 747 Broadway was to replace it with another building after the first building of the same nature after the first building failed. I really think it's just being land banked, and it's a power move to control or act as gatekeeper for the property use downtown Gary.
What's a land bank?
A land bank is where you acquire properties and you basically put them in the bank the way you would put your money in the bank. So that would be a land bank.
Got it.
So, right, I was about to ask, was that valid? I don't believe it to be valid, but you know what we're going to do? This is what we're going to do. We're going to follow this up with a series of videos. So I'm going to ask some of them questions, and I'm going to do a recap at the beginning of the next subject to give you guys the answer from the county. Yeah, they did take my building, and we're waiting to be paid for that now, but we're not going to discuss my building. We're just talking about 700 Broadway at this point. So if any of you guys out there listening live, we got any other questions, we got 2 minutes because we're going to keep this thing down to 15 minutes, and that's it. You got any questions?
Not at this point. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just asked you guys. So now I'm going to do my call to action, right? So my call to action is this. I want you guys to call me at 219-716-0700, and we're going to discuss doing a formal petition to the GHA for the release of information. We're going to want to know 2 or 3 things. The real reason why they, quote unquote, as according to the article, stepped into a litigation that had nothing to do with them and volunteered to take the building, right? And if it was just to avoid taxation or, I don't know, fall into the wrong hands, the city wouldn't have to pay taxes on it. I don't see the difference in the city having it deeded to them or the Economic Development Department. And 2, why is it that the GHA is going to pay for the demolition? Why do we need to use GHA dollars? Or where did the dollars come from the demolition? And we're going to ask them, there's those two things in the form of a petition or a joint request for information under the Indiana Open Door Policy or Information Act, or Freedom. I formerly called the Freedom Information Act because that's my favorite jargon for it, the FOIA. And you call me up and we see how many of you guys is interested in getting together to do that. I'm going to do my own individual one anyway. And also March 28th at 6 o'clock, the Gary Housing Authority at their building at 578 Broadway is having a public comments for their agenda that they're having there at that time. And maybe you guys show up and we can ask the board, why was this decision made to get involved in the 700 Broadway dilemma? And we also may ask our Economic Development Department, are they going to seek to hold somebody accountable? Because there had to be some decision makers in the development of this building for it to have the problems that they allege to have to knock it down. So we want to know who is responsible for these inspections along the way. And if we in fact had a compliance officer overseeing our $1.5 million, we may not have had a compliance officer, but it'd be interesting to know if we did. All right, I'm John. Thanks for watching. I'll take care of you guys with the information I said. And again, you're more than welcome to call me, 219-716-0700. Thank you very much.